Hey friends, do you really find it difficult to understand the pharmacology concepts? Then don't be late. Subscribe to my channel and get an easy access to the pharmacology. I made this video on diabetes mellitus because this is the most affecting disease worldwide, and 10% of the world is suffering from this disease. So let's have an overview of this disease. Diabetes mellitus is a metabolic disorder that prevents the body from properly using the energy from the food that we eat. As we all know that glucose is a major source of energy in our body. So when there is no glucose available to the cells of our body, the cells start starve and they start depending on some secondary sources of energy. So there are few hormones in our body that regulate the glucose level. So the major organ that is responsible for secreting the hormones controlling the glucose level is pancreas, and pancreas is made up of two glands that intimately mix together into one organ. The major part of the pancreas is made up of exocrine cells, while the minor part is made up of endocrine cells. As I have discussed in the last slide, that pancreas composed of two cells, exocrine cells and endocrine cells. So let's discuss the functions of these cells. Exocrine cells produces the different enzymes that help in digestion of the food. So exocrine cells basically releases their enzymes into a series of progressively larger tubes that eventually join together to form the main pancreatic duct, while the endocrine part of the pancreas releases different hormones including insulin and glucagon directly into the bloodstream. So the major difference is that the exocrine releases their secretions in the pancreatic duct, while the endocrine part directly secrete their hormones in the bloodstream. So the pancreatic hormones insulin and glucagon work together to maintain the proper level of sugar or the glucose in the blood. The cells of the exocrine part of the pancreas are the acinar cells, while the cells in the endocrine part is composed of small islands of cells called the islets of Langerhans. So these endocrine cells are responsible for the secretions of insulin and glucagon. Insulin is secreted from the beta cells that are present in the center of the islets, while the glucagon is secreted from the alpha cells that are present in the periphery of the islets. So insulin is responsible for converting the blood glucose into glycogen, while glucagon is responsible for reconverting the glycogen into glucose when there is need. So let's discuss some functions of insulin and glucagon, that how these two hormones are different from each other and actually how they do in our body. So insulin is an anabolic hormone. That means it is involved in something building up. So it is involved in the storage of glucose in muscle and adipose cells. It stores the glucose in muscle cell as glycogen. Actually, there are insulin receptors present on the adipose and muscle cells, and as soon as the insulin bind to these receptors, they causes the glucose transporter present inside the cells to move towards the outside of the cell and cause the glucose to enters into the cell, where they are converted into the glycogen form. So it decreases the gluconeogenesis, which means that synthesis of glucose from some other source like from protein or fat. So insulin also inhibits this gluconeogenesis or decrease this gluconeogenesis. Plus it promotes the growth overall. So ultimately decrease the blood glucose level. And all this happened right after the meals when there is need to lower the glucose level immediately. Next, the glucagon, that is a catabolic hormone. Catabolic means to break down. So it breaks down the glycogen into glucose and promote the gluconeogenesis. So finally it increases the blood glucose level. It normally occurs in case when there is no glucose source available from outside, like when there is no meal and we have to do some strenuous activity, then glucagon perform its action in our body. So, diabetes mellitus is the most common disease worldwide, and it affecting 10% of the world. So, out of that, 10% have diabetes mellitus type 1 and 90% have diabetes mellitus type 2. The difference between these two diabetes depends on underlying mechanisms. So, let's start with type 1 diabetes mellitus, where the patient does not make enough insulin. There is a kind of type 4 hypersensitivity in which the person's own T cells attack the pancreas cells. So, type 4 hypersensitivity is actually the cell mediated immune response. So, let's have an overview of this. We know that T cells are the part of our immune system and they act as a defense system of our body. So, whenever there is any foreign particle attack or enters in our body, the T cells start defending our body against that foreign particle. So, sometimes when there is some abnormality in the genetic makeup, the T cells start attacking the person's own body cells. So, antigens may be of small peptides, lipids, polysaccharides, or sometimes it may be on body cells. But there is always a self tolerance in our body that make it that don't let the T cells to attack the person's own body cells. But in type 1 diabetes mellitus patients, the self tolerance is lost due to some abnormalities in the genetic makeup, and that led the T cells to attack the pancreatic beta cells. In this way, there is no insulin produced or no enough insulin produced by beta cells, leading to hyperglycemia, that is type 1 diabetes. So, there are some symptoms of type 1 diabetes mellitus, which are polyphagia, glycosuria, polydipsia, polyuria, and the most important is the ketoacidosis, that is a diabetic ketoacidosis. So, we will discuss one by one each of these symptoms. Polyphagia, that is characterized by increase in appetite. As we know that glucose is a major source of our energy in our body. So, when there is no insulin produced in the body, the glucose levels increase and cells starve of that crucial energy source, and as a result of that, the cells start depending on some other sources or some secondary sources, which means that adipose start breaking the fat, which is the lipolysis, muscles tissue break the protein, and as a result of that, the patient feel more hungry and there will be increase in the weight loss. The second one is the glycosuria, that is increased glucose in urine. Kidneys are involved in filtration process of our body. So, when there is increased glucose level in the blood, the kidneys try to filter it in urine. Glucose is actually a osmotically active molecule. So, when the kidneys try to filter it, this glucose tend to derive more and more water as well through the kidneys, and in this way the volume of the urine increases as well as the urination process increases, leads to polyuria, and in order to overcome that water loss, your body feel dehydrated, and thus the patient also feels a lot of thirst. So this is the polydipsia. One of the major symptoms of diabetes mellitus type 1 is diabetic ketoacidosis. As we have earlier discussed, that glucose is the major source of energy in our body to the cells. When there is no glucose available to the cells start definitely starving, and they start depending on some secondary sources, like muscles start breaking down the proteins and adipose tissue start breaking down the fats. So the ketoacidosis involves the breaking down of fats, where the fats are converted into free fatty acids. These free fatty acids in liver converted into ketones and keto acids. Ketone bodies generally consist of three different molecules, like acetones, beta hydroxybutyrate, and acetoacetate. All of these are different in their natures. Like acetone is a true ketone body, beta hydroxybutyrate is a hydroxy acid, and the acetoacetic acid is a true keto acid. In the previous slide, we have seen that how the ketone bodies are produced or in the blood of diabetic patients. So in this, let's see that what the ketone bodies actually do and what they are responsible for. The first major, we can say that the outcome or the side effect of the ketone bodies is a cosmorespiration. Cosmorespiration is the deep and labored breathing in order to expel out maximum of the carbon dioxide out of the blood, because the ketone bodies are responsible for causing the pH of the blood to move it towards the acidic side. So the one of the a major outcome of the acidic pH of blood is a cosmorespiration. The second one is a hyperkalemia, and how it actually occurs. When the pH of the blood is acidic, it means that more and more hydrogen ions are present in the blood. There are hydrogen and potassium ATPase pump in the cell that tends to move the hydrogen in the cell and potassium out of the cell in the blood, leading to hyperkalemia. Secondly, the insulin plays a major role. Like when there is insulin in the blood, it not only lowers the glucose level, in fact it also stimulates the sodium potassium ATPase that tends to move the sodium out of the cell and potassium into the cells from the blood. So when there is no insulin, it means the sodium potassium ATPase channels are blocked or they are not working, which means that there is increased potassium in the blood. So this is the second cause of hyperkalemia. So instead of increased potassium in the blood, the cell stores of potassium decreases. The third one is the anion gap. There is increased positive and negative ion difference due to this ketoacidosis. So these are the major three side effects of the ketone bodies in the blood.